Hey everybody, we're back with another episode of the Sideline Intel NBA podcast. As always, I am Jeff Griffith. Alongside me is Jacob Rosenfarb, checking in from different parts of the country, but here to bring you some more basketball. Jacob, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Jeff. Great to have NBA basketball back. Happy to have the playoffs in full swing. It's exciting times.
It is very exciting. You mentioned it, the playoffs. The playoffs are here. The seeding games were fun, and it was fun to have just competitive basketball, see, Dame going off and guys like TJ Warren getting going. The Suns going 8-0 only to get screwed, which was just beautiful. We can get into that later, but it's all that being said, the fun storylines, the playoffs are here, and we're one day down as of recording. We're recording it on Tuesday, August 18th at 12:40 p.m. Eastern time. So we're a little before the Tuesday games. The Monday games are in the books, so we're 4 games down. And it was pretty fun action. I mean, other than Toronto, Brooklyn, it was good. It was, exciting games. All the other 3 games were pretty exciting down to the wire. So I guess, first off, just general impressions. What did you kind of take away from the first day of playoff ball?
I think Monday's action, was, I think, a nice sign of things to come. We got started with a great Denver-Utah game, went to overtime, Donovan Mitchell at 57 points, and I think that spoke to the level of competition we're going to get in these playoffs, because personally, that was my big concern, was how are they going to ramp up the intensity come playoff time? Are we just kind of going to be – because there was – the play-in games did kind of have some of a scrimmage feel, and so I was very curious how the intensity would ramp up, and I think we saw that from the jump. That this is the mindset has been changed. It is playoff basketball. It's a little bit more intense. The referees are going to let them play a little bit more, and it's so much fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree. I was able to catch about a game and a half yesterday. I caught the end of the Sixers-Celtics game, which was very interesting, and then I caught the Clippers-Mavs game. Again, very interesting. Couple of quick questions on those 2 games. First one real quick. What do you think the Sixers showed last night in sticking with the Celtics for about 47 and a half minutes?
Sixers, to me, that might have been the most interesting game of the day, in the sense of the Sixers are probably the most confusing team in the playoffs right now. I think their range between ceiling and floor is probably the greatest between any of these truly contending teams. And so to see them hang tough with the Celtics team, using pieces that they really hadn't used a whole lot throughout the season. I think Alec Burks was a big part of the reason they were able to stay close. Josh Richardson had a really nice game. Matisse Thybulle continued a lot of the good things he's been doing on the defensive end. And so that's kind of become the identity of this Philadelphia team to me, is this gritty, tough, guard-oriented defensive team that's really going to funnel all of their defense towards, like I said, those top 2 guys at the top, and Josh Richardson and Thybulle, and then also Embiid down low. And so it's an interesting mix of skill sets, and I think the Celtics are a rough matchup for them, but it's definitely one of the most interesting series in the terms of just the range of possibilities.
Yeah. The one thing I was struck by, you're absolutely right. I think the way they've used some of those bench pieces is, Thybulle got 33 minutes. And I saw a stat that when he was guarding Tatum was like 2 of 9 for 4 points. And then the whole rest of the team held him to like 28 points on 19 shots or something stupid like that. And that Thybulle's a great defender, and that's why they brought him in. That's his calling card. He's a good offensive player, but he was drafted in the first round solely on his defensive abilities. What did the guy average in college? Like 3.5 steals a game, something stupid. But one thing I found funny, and I don't want to stick too long on this series because I want to real quick ask you something about the Mavs. But Embiid last night goes off for 26 and 16 and then says he didn't do enough. What do you think about that?
It was certainly an interesting post-game comment. I think if my memory is correct, 14 shots though. That's 26 points on only 14 attempts is impressive. But 15, sorry. But makes me think still, let's get him a little bit more involved in the offense, especially with Ben Simmons still not there. It's there's really not a whole lot of options. Tobias Harris looks solid, like he's clearly grown into that second developer, or second creator type of role, but end of the day, Sixers are going to live and die by JoJo's abilities. And so to end the game with 15 shots, I kind of understand why he feels like I need to carry this team more, because I think in his mind, he wants more of the pressure placed on his shoulders. He wants more of the responsibility.
which it should be, especially like you said without Simmons, because Harris is good, but like you said, he's a second to Embiid. He is not. Whereas Simmons was kind of on Embiid's tier. There's a drop off there. But enough on that series. Clippers Mavs, I think was when we left the night, like when the day was over, Clippers Mavs was the headline, all about this ejection of Kristaps Porzingis. Unfortunately I missed the play, so I can't speak to exactly what happened. I saw some highlights. Do you want to kind of real quick get into that? Do you have thoughts on that? Are you for, against? What?
I'm always against ejections, just basically across the board, always against ejections. This one was particularly soft. It was a second technical. The first technical came after he complained, after it looked like a pretty legit block that was called for a foul. He complained and he got a tech for that. It's soft. It's sad. This is kind of where I feel like a playoff atmosphere with fans and that kind of intensity would change it. Because I do think referees have an understanding of like, this is a more important game. This is a bigger stage. I'm not the focus. Like, I'm taking the whistle out of my mouth. Like, this is not about me to a certain extent. And I wonder if some of those referees maybe, I don't know, lost sight of some of those values with this interesting setting that we're in. And so that's my point, is that I don't want to see Kristaps Porzingis ejected in a playoff game, especially when they're up by 5. I think it was like middle of the third quarter. And so it's disappointing, but hopefully it's a sign of things to come, because that is one of the most interesting series out there for me. We talked a lot about it before, that there's obviously some worries in Dallas in terms of how much they still have, especially without Dwight Powell. But I think we saw last night they have Luka's enough offensive firepower. Seth Curry, when he gets hot, like they have enough pieces to make this competitive. And so I'm excited for things to come.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the ejection sucks because one thing I remember thinking last year, or I guess it's 2 years ago now. It still feels like last year, probably because of how weird this season was. But LeBron was still in Cleveland, so it was not last year. I think about that J.R. Smith game. This is a weird thing to bring up when we're talking Clippers Mavs, but I think about how the Cavs pretty much should have had that game. Like, they were one stupid thing away from probably winning. And when you are not supposed to win a series, every time, any game that you can win, you need to win. And the Mavs, not that they're like heavy, like it would be earth-shattering end of the world if they picked off a couple of games here. But if they want to win this series, they are enough of an underdog, but they have to take every chance they can get. And last night was that chance. And in game one especially, if you have a chance to win game one as an underdog, and for any reason you don't, that sucks. Because now the other team has the lead. You're fighting even more of an uphill battle. You kind of have to win game two. And for it to happen the way it did, when it was during such a point of the game where it was so promising for Dallas. I mean, Dallas turned it on at one point in this game, and they led by double digits. And throughout the whole, even without Kristaps, they were in this game right down to the wire. I mean, it was 118 to 110. If they don't get held to 13 third quarter points, in the quarter where he was taken out, this is probably a different game. And I think I'm rambling a little bit here, but I think my point is that just looking at this Dallas team and looking at, don't get me wrong, I want to see Kawhi go as far into these playoffs as I can. But it's always fun to see a good young team shock some people in a playoff setting. I think about the Titans last year in football. But maybe they're not a good team, but they're a young team with potential. You get my point. I feel for Dallas because this would have been fun to see them pick off game one, set the tone for maybe a 7-game series, and they still can. But when you lose a game in that fashion, I guess is what I'm saying, when you lose a game in that fashion and you're the underdog, it just makes your battle that much more uphill. And that sucks.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, that a backbreaker in every definition of the word. I am curious now, as you were talking about it, I wonder how much of these old kind of playoff ideas still hold true. Like the idea of, like you were saying, like game one is so crucial, especially as the underdog, and now you have to win game two. I wonder now, without the travel, without home court advantage, I wonder if teams see a massive difference between game 2 and 3 or things along those lines. Obviously a win's a win. They're going to take any win they can get, but I wonder how the lack of travel and how the lack of home court advantage is really changing sort of playoff strategies.
And that is more my point. You're absolutely right. That is more my point, though, I was trying to say, and I thank you for saying that because it kind of put it in better phrasing, that it's the win is a win, and you need to get it wherever you can get it is kind of where I'm at. Like, I don't think it's going to be harder per se to win game 3 than game 2, but I still think there's a mental game to being an underdog and going down 2-0, especially when game 1 was in your hands. And that's kind of what I'm saying. But you're absolutely right. I think that's an interesting thing we can kind of get into next, I feel like, is going forward into these playoffs, talking about the idea that there's not going to be that sense of, oh, the road team picked up a game, on games 1 and 2, and they get to take that home, or like how we always talk about, oh, they're taking a 3-1 lead back to wherever, their home city. Like, there's not going to be any of that. Like, it's just 7 games. And so I look at, and I know we touched on this last time because they had just clinched it, but I look at the Lakers being the 1 seed or the Bucks being the 1 seed, and does that really mean anything? I'd say no.
I would have to agree. It's all basically about matchups at this point, and and how the playoff field lines up is real. Like you just said, no home court advantage, no sort of really. It's if you're jostling for positioning at this point, we saw with the Jazz towards the end of their play-in games. Like there was a lot of jostling for matchups because that's all you could really kind of hang your hat on is that you can't rely at all on your home court advantage at all. You can't rely on any sort of traditional sort of methods we've had to establish, to give some teams some advantage. It's pure basketball at this point. And a lot of that comes down to luck. A lot of that comes down to injuries. A lot of that comes down to referees. And so I would not be surprised if this playoffs becomes even crazier than we could possibly imagine.
And to bounce off of that, I love that. Like, the only thing I wish we had in this playoffs was a crowd. Like if like the idea of, and I know we've talked about this before, but it still strikes me, the idea of variable-less basketball or variable-less sports in general is fascinating because, there are so many times where I'll look at a game and I'll be like, it's a toss-up, but I'm gonna it's the home team. Because you do have to travel to get there, and you have to be in an unfamiliar place, and you're in a hostile environment if you have a good home fan base. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see what kind of things can unfold because of that. I think to kind of transition into the playoffs themselves, I guess what I'll ask in that vein is give me some bold thoughts. Give me some, all right, clean slate, no influences. Give me some crazy things that you think are going to happen as we look big picture at this playoff bracket.
So my initial, I had not prepped, but I had some kind of thoughts on this early. My sad one though is that my big thing was going to be Thunder over Rockets. I thought that was going to be a big bold take, and I don't know. I thought I was going to be able. And then Russ goes out, and then I see everyone else is predicting this. I'm like, that's not that unique. But I am still sticking with that. I do think the Thunder will take down the Rockets. I think that's going to be a really fun series. But I think that will probably that's probably the boldest first round I'm willing to go. I don't know. I think favorites. I hate to say it. I think these favorites are going to roll. I think, especially in the East, it seems incredibly top heavy. And the West, we'll get some fun series for sure, like we just saw with Dallas and Clippers last night. We're gonna get some fun series, but I feel relatively confident favorites will roll. What do you think?
Are you specifically referring to the first round?
I am. Yes, just first round, just for these specific matchups.
Okay.
I think it's going to be hard for underdogs to really like you just said, just in terms of these specific matchups for these. You know what I mean? Like Dallas is a good team, but the Clippers are a rough matchup for them. And it's going to be. Denver, Utah, the same vein. Utah's a talented team, but the loss of Mike Conley for at least the next couple games, probably the series, that's rough. Bogdanovich already being out. That's So just there's not the typical underdog matchup that plays in their favor. If you see what I'm saying, it's a favorites heavy first round. It feels like.
I absolutely agree, and I wouldn't add another bold prediction to this first round. I might say something like Blazers push it to 7, or like I don't even know, like the Nets win a game or something. You can say something like that, but it doesn't seem worth even mentioning because it's not that of importance. At the end of the day, one team wins a series, and no one cares if you go to 7. But I think I will say part of what I was asking, even though, was look down the road. I mean, is there something you see more, even in the later rounds that you see could be a product of this, very, like, what's the word I'm going for? I don't want to keep saying without variables. I'm trying to think of a perfect word to describe this clean slate we're playing in right now. Help
Well,
me.
the reality is it's a new season. It's a new season with players who a wide range of how players reacted over quarantine, and I think kind of some of that's still been evened out. But I mean, we're seeing. I think the answer to your question to me is Denver. Denver is a completely different team than what we left off at, in March when the NBA stopped. This is the Nuggets team we have now is wildly different, and that's due in large part to Michael Porter Jr. Michael Porter Jr. got the start yesterday. He is fit seamlessly into what the Nuggets are trying to do. He is really the ideal pairing to Jokic and Murray. They look like just such a well-crafted offensive team combined with a strong, principled defensive team. And it's a unique combination right now in the NBA, just because I feel like the weapons they have offensively, not a lot of people are matching. And I really do think that team has the capability to take down one of these top LA teams and really give the Bucks trouble if they were to meet sometime, come finals. Bucks Nuggets would be in a very interesting series.
Yeah, I love this Nuggets team because they're just the kind of team I really vibe with, in the sense that they're very unheralded. They don't have those headline names, those Kawhis, those LeBrons, those even Chris Pauls or James Hardens that make you go, I want to follow this team night in and night out. I need to cover this team night in and night out. I need to read all the information about this team because they're rapidly evolving and there's storylines there. They've just kind of kept winning games and playing a very good, clean brand of basketball, almost like a Raptors in a sense. Like, the Raptors are on our radar now, but like when I think about the Raptors of like a year or two ago, maybe even like pre-Kawhi, Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan in terms of their notoriety feel like, especially 2 or 3 years ago, feel like the way we view a Jamal Murray and a Nikola Jokic right now. Obviously different players, very much so, but similar in the sense that like we all know they're good, but no one's like putting them in top 5 categories. No one's like, like talking about one of them the way we talk about LeBron, and for good reason. But all that being said, I think they're just this team that has just kept winning games for years now. And I think it'll be interesting to see, like you said, in a place like this, in a setting like this, where there is no fan base. You don't have to go on the road to LA in both the conference semis and the conference finals and the NBA finals if you reach the Bucks when you would theoretically get there. I think this team, it's going to be exciting to see what happens when you just put a team like this that's so well built and plays so well together, without the big headlines, without the big fan craziness, and see what they can do. And one take I have about them, I know I just compared them to the Raptors, but I'm going to go a little bit further west. They feel like a Gonzaga to me. Like, I'm making my college comparison. What do you think of that take?
I love it. Unheralded, great coaching. They know they have a strong identity. They know who they are. They get players who fit that identity, and they feed off that. They build off, like I just said, that identity, that sort of purpose into a group-wide purpose into what they're doing. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So I just think that at the end of the day, everything you said, like that's kind of how I access that opinion. And also I think throughout a season, we look at Gonzaga and like we know they're good, but we know they're good just because we know they're good. We don't know they're good because they're out there every night beating the Lakers and the Clippers of the world. Not that the Nuggets haven't, but like we don't look at – I think there's a part of every college basketball fan that just knows Gonzaga's good. Like, never will believe Gonzaga's a championship contender, but we just kind of know they're good. And I feel like that's how a lot of us look at the Nuggets. Like, we all know they're good because they're at the top of the standings. But, like, I feel like for a lot of basketball fans, this might be the time where they finally get the chance to see the raw Nuggets and why they've been at the top of the standings all this time,
A great point. And I really do think that Michael Porter Jr. is a type of player who can draw those fans in. He's as appealing as Jokic is to us hardcore basketball fans. He doesn't exactly have a game that screams to the casual audience. Michael Porter Jr. does. Michael Porter Jr. is that 6'10", lanky forward that's going to pull up from anywhere. He can dunk on people, going to rain threes. He has a very traditional scorer's game, but a very appealing game to watch. And so I think that's really going to bring in a new audience, and I think will excite and raises the overall ceiling of the Nuggets, obviously, but it also excites that maybe national audience that kind of is necessary to get the ball rolling on, you know, a NBA championship type contender.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Jacob, I don't know where we want to go next. I think we summed up that Nuggets point well. I think you described what you had to say very well, and I don't know if I have much to add, but I don't know who's next. I guess who jumps off the page to you?
Well, we can start with I think the last Western Conference matchup that we haven't really talked about, OKC Houston.
That is exciting. Yes.
So yes, I love Houston OKC. That's one of the most exciting matchups to me. I think that's the one I had circled, kind of when that whole seeding process went down. That is the matchup that really stuck out to me, and I can't wait to see it. The Russell Westbrook injury certainly puts a damper on everything, but let's pray for a quick recovery. Pray for maybe Game 3 is what I've heard optimistically. I really don't know, but yeah, that's going to be such a fun matchup, such a clash of two different styles. Obviously, all the personalities that are going to come into that, but just from a purely basketball standpoint, it's incredibly exciting.
Yeah, I look at this series, and we talked about the Thunder on our last podcast pretty extensively because of how wild it has been to see this team succeed as heavily as it has. And I think I agree with you that I think the Thunder should win this series in like 7. But I look at a team that we've talked about that is playing their best basketball right now. They've been very good in the bubble. They have great leadership, and I think I get this feeling that the way we've seen Oklahoma City grow, especially entering and into and through the bubble games, they look to me like a team that's ready to win a playoff series in this environment. I don't know if that feels pretty accurate to you or not, but
certainly, yeah, they really are, like you just said, kind of built for this sort of setting. They are, great, well coached, deep bench. Not going to go, I'm not breaking any minds here, but the Rockets are pretty reliant on James Harden, and if James Harden has a rough game, the Rockets' bubble chances are tanked. There is no real applicable situation per se for the Thunder. I think that's what makes them so appealing in this setting versus a team like the Rockets that are so one man army. And I love to see that convergence of styles, and I love to count out James Harden. I want to count him out. I want to be proven wrong. I want him to drop 60 for 4 straight games because he is one of the most talented scorers the NBA has ever seen, and I think we forget that a lot. And I'd love for him to remind people just how freaking talented he is.
I absolutely agree, and that's something that just popped into my head as you were talking. That one thing I wonder. We always talk about playoff Harden, and I know we mentioned it last time how the narrative is that Harden runs out of gas by the playoffs, and we've talked about in one hand he's not out of gas because he's played 8 games. On another hand, though, do you wonder if for someone like him who is such of a spark plug, do you wonder if this? I guess I don't know if I feel one way or the other. So I guess I'll just ask it as a yes or no question, or a one or the other question for you. Do you think that this atmosphere will be more or less conducive to Harden having the kind of explosive nights he needs to push this Rockets team to the playoffs?
I think more. I think that might be the easy answer, but I think more. I think, like you said, he is so well rested. I do think there. I mean, so the argument surrounding sort of a playoff drought or playoff sort of fatigue from him. The common retort to that is, well, everyone else is fatigued just as much. Like, let's not give all these excuses to Harden over and over again. But I do really think there is some truth to the fact that, like, when you're carrying a team night in, night out, the physical toll that he takes on his body, and just I really have to think that this hiatus did some good for him in terms of his ability to regenerate. And so I'm excited, and we've been proven right in so far in the bubble. That's the thing. He's been phenomenal in the bubble. He looks rejuvenated. He looks like somebody who's played themselves into shape and is now at the peak of his sort of abilities. And so I'm inclined to believe we're going to get some special Harden games. Will it be enough? Who knows? But if I'm a betting man, I'm banging the over on all his point totals just because I think, when in doubt, I'm going to ride with James Harden.
All right, fair enough. I think that's a valid answer, and I think the way you kind of explained it is, I would definitely have to agree with that general line of thinking. I think the reason, though, that I wonder if it will be less conducive is I wonder if part of what you need to be that explosive spark is the atmosphere. Like how much does someone like him, who kind of has to be like, again, explosive spark, be that just explosion of energy and scoring and will, how much of that do you lose when you have no crowd to feed off of, when you have no moment to feed off of? That's kind of where I look at the possibility of it hurting his chances, because I do think rested Harden is scary Harden, and Harden almost feels like the way he plays the game and the way he acts on the court, in a sense, almost feels more. It feels like he's built for just in the gym, because he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who needs the crowd. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy who's like, oh yeah, like, pumping up the crowd, like getting into it. Like, he just got this like this kind of stoic look to him a lot of the time when he plays, and I almost feel like, this is just you're kind of seeing it, the back and forth I go through in my head. Like, there's less of an atmosphere. He's going to have less energy from that. But he's Harden, and he doesn't play with like this like extreme fire in terms of like emotion. Am I wrong? Like,
No, I don't think you're wrong at all, Jeff. I think this environment is so strange and so foreign to all these players that it's so hard to really predict how they react. I think, like your point though, of it being a little bit more of a low key setting, or that it's kind of similar to almost a scrimmage, just a kind of casual run. I think that does help out Harden. That does play into his strengths. He's to a certain extent, Harden is a street baller. He's going to do a lot of, he's having fun on the court. He's taking a lot of the principles of street ball, of isolation ball, and incorporated that into his game. And so that type of setting now reimagined in the NBA only, I think, seems to serve him.
Yeah, exactly. I think we both agree that at the end of the day, we'd love to see James Harden, be James Harden in these playoffs, but it's yet to be seen what that's going to look like in this atmosphere, how that's going to affect him one way or the other. But I think we also both agree that is one of the more intriguing first round playoff series, with all of the, it's closely matched. You've got clashing personalities, you've got storylines, you got all these different, clashing styles, all these different reasons this series is exciting. I'd counter that though, because I also think Pacers Heat is equally intriguing, if not more so. Initial thoughts on that series. I guess first question, is it more intriguing to you than OKC Houston, or is it the other way around?
Is it more intriguing? That's a great question. It's like picking children, Jeff. You can't really choose between them. You know what I mean? You love them both equally. So I can't wait for Pacers Heat. I think the forefront of that is T.J. Warren versus Jimmy Butler. That's what everyone's coming to see. I think we got a little taste of it in that play-in game, the warm-ups, but now come playoff time, we get it for, I think, at least 6 games. I think this is going to be an epic sort of one-on-one matchup. And surrounding it, are two really well-balanced teams. The Pacers especially really feel like they've come alive in Orlando, and I think this is such an exciting series because as I talked about on the first pod, there are a few people higher on the Heat than me. I am all in on the Heat bandwagon. I think what they've done, the team they've created, Eric Spoelstra, Bam Adebayo, the whole gang is really impressive. But the Pacers are not a good matchup for them by any means. I think the Pacers are similarly well built. I like their depth. I like the balance that they've created, and I can't wait to see the series.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I know you're high on the Heat, and I think for good reason. But it's easy to look at how unconventionally high we can be on the Heat, and therefore almost forget how good the Pacers are too. Because it's almost like if you're really high on one team, you almost feel in your head, like if you're really big on a certain 11 seed in college basketball, you might want to pick them against any 6 seed, and then they draw like Villanova, and you're like, now I'm not, like a couple years ago, I loved Buffalo, and I was like, I'm Buffalo. I will pick Buffalo. I have to pick Buffalo no matter who they play. And they drew Arizona and DeAndre Ayton. And I was like, nope, that's the matchup I'm not picking. And they didn't just win. They won by like 90. So case in point, it's really easy to be super high on the Heat, but the matchup, and where would we think differently if they had drawn the Sixers or drawn Boston? And I do agree that because of that, I think we do need to pump the brakes a little bit on all this Heat excitement because they got to get through this first one. All that being said, this Heat team is built very well. And at the forefront of it, I can't wait to see more playoff Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler versus TJ Warren, as you mentioned. I was reading an ESPN article about kind of the outlook for every team. And each ESPN blogger wrote about their team. And whoever covers the Pacers wrote that the most important matchup is Warren versus Butler. And whoever covers the Heat wrote that the most important matchup is Butler versus Warren. And I guess all of that being said, Warren has popped off in the bubble. Butler's a beast. Butler gets his in the playoffs. I have to ask, though, what on earth happened to Oladipo? Like, this was the face of this team a month ago. Obviously, he's been in and out with injury. But still, as far as talent, as far as being the guy, the face of the franchise from a talent perspective, Victor Oladipo was the guy. And all of a sudden, TJ Warren is just the guy now. You talk to anybody about the Pacers, and it's TJ Warren. Forget the two All-Stars. It's TJ Warren. What do you think?
It's a great point. And I think it speaks to the depth of the Pacers and speaks to just how dangerous they could be in this type of setting, just because Oladipo has kind of looked like, what is the analogy? Like a caged bull almost. Like we've seen little flashes, we've seen little moments of that former All-Star, but we haven't seen him fully unleashed yet, it feels like. And I'm hoping this is kind of the moment where he gets, where all the chains are off, the gate is opened and he is ready, because this feels like the moment. This feels like if they're able to pair what we've seen from TJ Warren, what we know we've seen in the past from Oladipo, that's a dangerous 1-2 combo. Add in Malcolm Brogdon, add in Sabonis. It is just such like I said, a well-built team, but at the end of the day, a talented team. These are talented players who fit well together, who do a lot of really nice things. And yeah, I think it's a very very thought out point that we cannot be sleeping on Oladipo. This is a sleeping giant that at any time has the ability to be the best player on this court, especially in this series.
Yeah, I agree. I keep getting stuck on the idea that if someone, I'll put it this way, if 2 months ago someone had said, yo man, they're going to restart the NBA, Pacers are going to play the Heat in the first round, and the big thing, the thing you're going to be most excited for is Jimmy Butler taking on TJ Warren, how on earth would you have reacted?
It's facts. Never. I would have told you you're lying to me. There's no way. It's exciting times, man. I think it speaks to this, like we keep talking about, this environment, just what it brings out of people, and the identity that some teams have crafted in just 8 games, like we're talking about. The identity of the Pacers has changed drastically in the last 8 games, and it is completely rechanged the entire landscape of the Eastern Conference.
I agree. I'm excited. I guess this is one I do want to hear. Give me your prediction.
Ooh, I think Heat in 7. I'll go cautious and go 7. I think it'll be a fun series. It's going to be a long, drawn out, bloody, physical matchup. It just feels like these two teams don't like each other. They both feel like they're talented. This is the most, I think this is the series where both teams feel like, A, we're the better team, B, we should win, and C, we have legit championship aspirations. You know what I mean? I think to a certain extent, some of the other Eastern teams are just kind of happy to be there. Both these teams we are legit. We have a shot at taking down anybody in this league. And, we're going for that chip. And so I can't wait to see what kind of intensity that brings out of both of them.
Yeah, it does feel like both of these teams are they're both in that category of whichever one gets out of here is the scariest underdog, pretty much of the playoffs. Because I think they're both scarier. The Heat and Pacers should be scarier to the Bucks and Raptors than I think the Rockets or Thunder should be to the Lakers or Clippers. Not even that the Heat and Pacers are markedly better, if at all. But I think there's just those matchups should scare a Bucks or a Raptors more than the Lakers or Clippers should be afraid of the Thunder or Rockets. And the reason I say that is to vibe with you that this series feels like that whole old adage of unstoppable force versus immovable object. Like one of these teams has to be eliminated in the series, but they both feel like the trendy upset underdog sleeper pick. And so I'm excited to see that. You briefly mentioned in passing as part of your spiel that these two teams don't like each other. And what's fun to me is it's Pacers and Heat in 2020, and it's Miles Turner and it's Victor Oladipo and it's Jimmy Butler and it's Tyler Hero and it's Kelly Olynyk and Kendrick Nunn and I think about the fact that like 7 years ago this was the Eastern Conference Series. Like this was the big series in the East, except it was Roy Hibbert and Paul George, and LeBron and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. And 6 or 7 years later, these teams don't even look like shells of those teams.
Not even a remnant, not even an artifact. It's just a completely foreign time. It's a great point. That's why the NBA is so great, in my personal opinion, as a young person who loves to see, transition, who loves to see people moving places. This is the height of what NBA basketball is supposed to be to a certain extent. These not super teams, but well constructed teams through free agency, through savvy moves that have brought them to this point. And it's a testament. Like we keep talking about, great coaching staffs, great front offices, teams with identities, teams who know what they want to do, and just go out and execute it. And as kind of basketball purists, I think that'd be a good way to describe us. That is music to our ears.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is awesome to see, just like you said, just how well teams can reconstruct themselves. Because I look at the Pacers, that team was so good. Those LeBron and Miami years, that team was like very competitive. I mean, they were a 1 seed. They were your Raptors. Good players on a great team that just couldn't beat LeBron. And it's wild to me to see them back in such a high tier of competition with none of those dudes. Like you think about, and it's totally a different beast. But you think about football, and if I were to tell you that the Chiefs would be in the Super Bowl in 2026, starting, I don't even know, Jaden Daniels at quarterback, and DeAndre Hopkins past his prime at receiver, and like this totally restructured team. It's totally a different beast in terms of roster construction. Football is a different beast, but in the same sense, it's just wild to think about any team being so good, not that far apart, with two just totally different squads. Because like everybody else in the East, other than these two franchises, was not good in that time. I mean, the Celtics were okay, but like the Bucks weren't really that good yet. The Raptors weren't totally there yet. The Sixers were not there. And I couldn't even. I mean, the Hawks were like the talk of the East at that point, and they suck now. Well, they're getting better, but I mean, the Knicks were still on the playoff cusp, And I just Bulls, yeah, absolutely. The Wizards, all these teams that are just trash now. And I look at the Pacers and Heat, and it just tells you something about those franchises, And they're not winning a championship this year, probably. But the fact that we can talk about them in that conversation when they are completely different from the 1 and 2 seed they were 5 years ago, 6 years ago, is impressive. And that is just in the frame of this podcast that has struck me, as you can probably tell. But it's impressive.
No, it's a great point. It's a great point, Jeff. And yeah, it's important. It's a very interesting moment to kind of take in this series and take in just how far as a league we've come.
Yeah, totally. I think I'm really excited to see this series. I think that goes without saying. We did kind of get away from predictions. I know you said
I'll stick with how about you?
I think I was trying to say this then, and I got sidetracked talking about the Pacers Heat thing. But I'm gonna go Pacers in 7, just to be a little different. Not just to be different, but I like the idea of being different, and I think I do believe that. I think I like the Pacers. I look at the group they trot out, and I wish my team had a group like that. I don't get me wrong, I'm a Sixers fan. I love Embiid, but you've got a purely talented best player, Victor Oladipo, a very good big. Obviously, no Sabonis right now. Malcolm Brogdon, a good young piece, and then a newly found killer in T.J. Warren. All right, Jacob. So we've been talking a lot about these well-constructed Pacers and Heat lineups. Like, there's no obvious LeBron in this series. There's no that. I mean, there's a Jimmy Butler, but there's no like clear like this guy is going to run the series. And so I guess what I would want to do with you and see how this shakes out is go 1 through 5 and kind of see like who's got the advantage in starting lineup. What do you think?
Love it. Love that idea.
So I guess we start at 1. For the Heat.
Start at their guards.
Yeah.
I think, like we talked about, I think Malcolm Brogdon is probably the cream of this crop, comparing him to either Kendrick Nunn or Goran Dragic. Two solid players, but I think Brogdon is continually kind of one of the more underrated players in the league.
I would agree.
So I think he takes that chip.
I agree. And then we go to 2, and we would probably have then like a Kendrick Nunn, and then at 2 or a Tyler Hero, and then at 2 for the criticism.
I think Duncan Robinson starts for that. I think that Duncan Robinson, NBA all-time leader in catch and shoot percentage this past season.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. Okay, so Duncan Robinson at the 2, paired up with Victor Oladipo. That feels like a pretty easy answer.
Yep.
Oladipo.
Duncan Robinson.
Oladipo. I think it's 2-0 Pacers. And then we go to the 3, and it feels like a pretty obvious answer because it's Jimmy Butler.
Yeah. Their lineup's a little funky now, so I think it's Justin Holiday technically.
Yeah, Justin Holiday against Jimmy Butler. And I think we both go Butler, obviously there. And then at the 4, we're looking at T.J. Warren now, and he's help me out here. Who's he pairing up against? Kelly Olynyk?
There's a list of guys at defense. They sometimes go Derrick Jones Jr. Hopefully he's okay.
Oh my God.
Scary fall. Sometimes it's sometimes when they go big, it's Bam and Kelly Olynyk. Sometimes there's some James Johnson, and they have a whole host of ideas. But I think basically, unless you want to pair him with Bam, which is a little unfair, I think T.J. Warren's taking the cake over any of the power forward options that the Heat are throwing out there.
I agree. And then lastly at the 5, we got Miles Turner, and then we've got Bam Adebayo. And
tell me your thoughts.
Ooh, that feels like a close one. But I probably, based on talent, just pure talent, I might give the edge to Adebayo. Would you agree?
I think that's where I'd land. I think Miles Turner is fun, and I think the package of Miles Turner is always more appealing than the actual player. Like the idea of somebody who protects the rim and shoots threes is really appealing. But end of the day, Bam Adebayo is a winning player. Bam Adebayo makes winning plays. He helps the team in more ways than he hurts them, which may not always be true for Miles Turner. And I love Bam's game. I love what he adds to this team. And those couple of games without Jimmy Butler really showed the kind of skill set that he possesses.
Yeah. So it's a close call in conclusion, but I think we both say Pacers 3-2.
Yeah, Pacers sounds like 3-2. So I think your Pacers and 7, Jeff. I love it.
I don't hate it. Yeah, I also think there's a big enough gap in favor of a guy like Jimmy Butler at that position, and I also know it's not going to be as simple as 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2. But I think it's a lot. It's more like, if anything, then rather than like 3-2, it's like 2.6 to 2.4. Like it's a very close when you really average it all out. So I think it's gonna be exciting to say the least. But I'll stick with Pacers in 7. I know it's taken about 10 minutes to get there, but I'll stick with that. I don't. Do you want to get off of this series, Jacob?
Yeah, one final thing is that I think we are a little discounting the benches as well. I think that the bench that Miami's put together is incredible. Iguodala's look really good, it feels like, in this restart. I don't think enough people are talking about that. I think too many people kind of, put dirt on his grave much too prematurely. And so whoever you're starting versus, it looks like Goran Dragic is going to start with Kendrick Nunn coming off the bench. That's still a valuable piece off the bench. So I think maybe our starting lineup slightly leans Pacers, but bench I'm pretty going heavily Miami. And so I think that's going to be such an interesting comparison, and I can't wait to see how it plays out.
And that's honestly, you're right, and that's why I think it's more even than 3-2. Because it's so much more to it. But it is fun to just kind of compare those lineups side by side because they're very good and they're very interesting lineups. We've touched on that plenty. But we can get back to Sixers Celtics if you want. It's an odd series because it feels like it should be closer match than it seems.
Definitely. In theory, like we talked about from the jump, like the Sixers' range of possibilities is so much greater, it feels like, than any other team to a certain extent. I mean, if they got swept in some kind of humiliating fashion, I wouldn't be shocked, just because this team's been in disarray all season, and it would almost feel like a fitting end to their year. But if they all turned it around and, they hopped in Embiid's back and really built their, kind of recharged their offense overnight and built it around him and made them this tough, gritty defensive team with an all NBA type center, that's a type of team that can make a conference finals run like that. So, I mean, there's such a range of possibilities for Philadelphia. I think that's what makes them so intriguing. And I think game one was an indication of kind of where this team might be headed. Like I said, they're kind of steering into that gritty, tough mentality. I'm curious if that can kind of lead them to a series win.
Yeah, I totally agree. I almost look at game one and I see like I go back to what I said almost the very beginning of this podcast about Mavericks and Clippers, about how when you're kind of the underdog, you can't drop a game that is in your grasp. And I will say that when I got home mid-game and I saw that they were in it, I was a little surprised because I thought the Celtics would just handle the series. I did. And it almost they were really one bad home stretch away from possibly being up 1-0. If a couple things break differently down that stretch, there were a couple really back-breaking plays. Like they got within, I think it was 94-91 or 95-91. And then Boston scored, got a quick takeaway, open offensive board, open three, bam, 8-point game. And that was so backbreaking late in the game like that. And that's one of those things in playoff basketball where you have to get those things to go your way. You can't just be like, well, we didn't get those things, we should have won. Because no, you have to get those things. You have to, a lot of those things aren't just luck. But I really do feel like other than kind of that late game, what's the word? Not taper, but like the kind of just kind of like petered off to the end. I almost feel like, or petered out, I should say. I almost feel like that should be a sign of encouragement that they were probably in the game more so than we would expect. Would you agree?
Definitely. I think there were the amount of Celtics 4-0 series predictions or Celtics 4-1 was surprising to me. There was a lot of people really bagging on the Sixers, and I think that's more because their expectations were so high that everyone just feels a little damaged. Everyone feels a little, kind of angry and not willing to put their eggs in that basket. And so I think there is almost a zigging where others are zagging. Like, you had such expectations and now you have no expectations. Let's kind of see. Let's just go out and play basketball. And I'm still worried about their reliance on players like Shake Milton. There was a lot of Shake Milton last night, it felt like, and so that's going to be interesting going forward. But the talent is certainly there. I would love to see them put it all together. I'm not sure it's under this coach, but I would love to see them put it all together.
Yeah, and we can get more into the big picture about this Sixers team going forward because we talked so much about how they are one of the more confusing teams in the league. But we're talking playoffs right now, and even with some of the promising signs of last night, I still think this is the Celtics series to lose. Generally speaking, when you look at the Sixers last night, as encouraged as you should be looking at the Sixers from the perspective of they hung in that game longer than they were expected to. They were with the Celtics. They had a lot of good moments. They had a chance to win that game. All those things are encouraging. I still stand by that, that all happened, and a lot of these Celtics weren't having their best night. This was most of the Tatum and Brown show last night, and I think it's hard for me to believe that enough of those things that we feel like have to happen, like guys like Kemba have to have their not greatest nights, guys like Marcus Smart have to continue to not have their greatest nights. Like, there are going to be there are enough guys on this Celtics team who can fill in the gaps when others aren't there all the way, that I feel like it's too many unexpected things that need to happen for the Sixers team to be able to win this series. And so at the end of the day, I still have to say I think Celtics in like 5.
Yeah. Sadly for Philly fan, I think it's a quick series. I think they'll all be close. That's the thing. Maybe one blowout here or there, but I think they'll all be close. But all Celtics victories.
Yeah, I agree, and I think at some point the Sixers will win in like strong fashion and bring hope and like win by like 15, one game. But again, there's just too many things that Celtics can throw at them, to the point where I don't see enough of those things going wrong to give the Sixers a chance to win a 7-game series against this team the way they're currently constructed. So that's kind of my final point on that. I don't know if you had anything else to add on that series, but I mean, if so, speak now or forever hold your peace. But
you cut out. I missed all of that.
no,
I missed all of it. I know.
I mean, it definitely recorded.
We can keep it.
Yeah,
exactly. It's still there. I just couldn't hear it.
That was so funny. You're like, gosh, my dad's calling. I'll come back in a minute because we got to get this done.
What did you ask me? What was
I just asked if you had any final thoughts on that series, and I said, "Speak now, or forever hold your peace." So you can honestly just say no.
Yeah. I'll just say that, and then you can do the wrap up.
Yeah,
cool. Yeah, Jeff. No, nothing that we haven't already covered. I think I can't wait for this series. I think it's we got a nice little taste in game one. I think we're going to get a whole lot more good basketball going forward.
Yeah, I agree, and I know we haven't touched on every series, but part of me doesn't think we need to. I just feel like we know what's going on with the Bucks and with the Raptors and Lakers. Otherwise, there's plenty of fun basketball ahead. We'll probably check back in after we get 3 or 4 games into these series and see where things are at and kind of start looking ahead. Wrapping up some of these blowout series. Where are we at with we're going to be at with some of these closer series. I'm excited for Pacers Heat, excited for Thunder Rockets. But all in all, I think we've pretty much run the gamut on looking ahead at these playoffs as far as what's really worth talking about right now. So, would you say the same?
Yep, couldn't agree more, Jeff. Couldn't agree. I think we hit the most important, and it's gonna be some really high quality basketball, and it's time. Playoff basketball is here. It's a sports utopia right now, if I do say so myself.
It truly is. It truly. Even if you don't like baseball like me, you've got baseball back in your life too, or hockey. I'm not that big into hockey, but sports are back, and that's the beautiful thing. And we've got playoff basketball, as you said. So. That alone is enough to make me happy. So thanks again for listening to episode 2 of the Sideline Intel NBA podcast. I'm Jeff Griffith with Jacob Rosenfarb wrapping things up. Remember, you can follow us both on Twitter. Follow Sideline Intel on Twitter at Sideline Intel or at sideline.intel on Instagram. Check us out. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course you can get us on our website at sidelineintel.com. Jacob, always a pleasure talking hoops with you, and I'm sure we'll be back soon. I'm Jeff Griffith. He's Jacob Rosenfarb, and we'll catch you guys later.